Ask yourself, Rennie, what would Jesus do? Rennie said, as far as I'm concerned, we walk by faith and fight on sight. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Short Stories, Synchronicity, Part 2. When we left off in Part 1, the families were taking a collective deep breath. After over a year of mayhem, they were finally able to exhale. The members of the Lopez, St. James, Baptiste, Charles, and Garcia families, whether they were a part of the notorious Five families or whether they were just relatives, they'd all had their lives turned upside down. So the heads of the respective families decided that it was a good idea to get leadership and the family members most affected together. And they decided that the absolute best way to make it possible for everyone's needs to be met was to divide the group up by gender. Over at Angela and Stephanie's estate in Dallas, the night was finally winding down, and all of the ladies were staying put. As was typical, Angela was playing hostess with the mostess, ensuring that everyone's sleeping arrangements were comfortable, the children's huge sleepover was under control, and the hired help who were in charge of the cleanup had everything that they needed to get it done and get out of there. When the Queen Mother approached her, she was deep in thought, so she didn't even hear the woman approach. Angela wasn't really into comparing herself against others or comparing her struggles against theirs. But by her estimation, the last few months had been harder on her than anybody else. Her 15-year-old son had run away with his girlfriend a few months shy of his 16th birthday. And while he was smart and he had the means, there was absolutely no way in her estimation that he could have pulled off something like that and completely stayed under the radar of everybody, unless he had help. And everywhere she turned, she was met with silence. She knew her husband. She knew how he thought. She knew how he moved. And there was absolutely no way in hell that he didn't know something. When they first discovered that Michael was missing, Q had dropped everything and headed home. He'd been in Puerto Rico dealing with the situation with the International Trafficking Organization. She'd already been frustrated with him because she knew that Michael was somehow involved in the effort. He was refusing to tell her anything, and she was having a hard time living without that information. He'd been just as determined as she was to find their missing son, and then all of a sudden, he wasn't. For nearly a week, he divided his attention between finding their son and reassuring and supporting her. He'd made it clear that he didn't blame her. The fact that Michael had run away right under her nose. And he'd been adamant that the same soldiers who let him get away were going to be instrumental in helping finding him, and then he was going to deal with every one of them. But like I said, a week later, something changed. Focus went from finding Michael and dealing with the soldiers who'd been obviously negligent in their duties to supporting and reassuring her. And something was rotten in the buttermilk. Eventually, he told her that Michael was fine, that he didn't know where he was, but he'd been reassured by someone he trusted, someone she trusted, that Michael was safe, he was not without supervision, and that she just needed to trust him and the families. And for Angela, that was a hard pill to swallow. Michael was 15 years old, and he wasn't the only one missing. Tamara was missing too, which meant that the teenagers were likely together. And there was all kind of ways that could go wrong. Not to mention, she felt like Q was playing a DNA game of sorts. Michael wasn't her biological child. She'd adopted him, so legally, he was hers. They were equally responsible for him. But Q had a prerogative that DNA provided that Angela just didn't. And that left her feeling disregarded and disrespected. So when the Queen Mother called her name for the third time, and she finally heard her, turned around, she said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know you were standing there. Things went well. Wouldn't you agree?" The Queen Mother said, "I think so too. But how are you, Angela?" Angela said, "I guess I'm all right." The Queen Mother asked, "Are you anxious about the round table?" Angela said, "Of course I am. Y'all are always full of so many surprises, and somebody always got a trick up their damn sleeve." The Queen Mother said, "I talked to my son before he left. He's not too happy with me right now." Angela asked, "Oh, really? And why is that?" The Queen Mother said, "'Cause I'm about to do something that he asked me not to do. But like I told him, I learned my lesson from that whole situation with Donovan, Maribel, and Portia. And I'm trying to turn over a new leaf, if you will." Angela just chuckled. The Queen Mother said, "Let's go to the garden and talk." Meanwhile, in Puerto Rico, LJ was standing in the back parking lot of Bellamy's. He'd gone back inside the club, gotten a pitcher of water, and poured it into the radiator of the disabled Honda Civic when he'd headed to his vehicle about 30 minutes earlier. The songstress, whose voice had captivated him, was just about to reach into the hood of her overheated car and further ruin her own night. He ran down on her saying, "Stop, wait, don't do that. Shorty, you about to get a face full of steam and water." Startled, the woman turned around and asked, "Who are you?" LJ said, "A man who doesn't want to see that pretty face with third-degree burns." She asked, "Are you a mechanic?" LJ chuckled and said, "Nah, I just know a little something about cars. In my estimation, this one is shot." Songstress said, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do?" LJ said, "Relax, I'm gonna take care of you." He let the car cool off, checked the coolant, saw that it was completely empty. And when he returned with the pitcher of water, poured it in the radiator, turned the car back on. His suspicions were confirmed when all the water came back out. The radiator was shot. LJ looked at the songstress, whose name he still didn't know, and said, "It's a wrap, shawty. You got somebody that can swing through and scoop you?" At that point, the entire parking lot was empty, other than the soldiers who were waiting in their vehicles on the side of the road for LJ to depart so that they could escort him to the Lopez estate. There wasn't a person around to be found. The singer looked at her phone, seeing that it was nearly 4 o'clock in the morning, and shook her head because she was out of options. LJ was exhausted. He wasn't no young whippersnapper. It was well past his bedtime, and he was not in the mood to be driving around the island, taking a woman that he didn't know, God only knew where. But his mother raised a gentleman, and as quickly as he could offer the young lady a ride, she shut him down. She said, "I appreciate the offer, but I don't think that's a good idea. I don't even know you. Hell, I don't know your name. It's clear you're not from here." LJ said, "Well, considering the position you in, you can assume that I'm from Krypton." The young woman laughed and said, "Oh, so you Superman now?" He said, "Nah, I'm LJ. Me and Superman just from the same planet." The young woman said, "My name is Lyric," and that was corny as hell. LJ said, "Lyric, huh? That's your stage name, or that's what your mother put on your birth certificate?" Lyric said, "That's the name on my birth certificate, and LJ is short for..." LJ said, "Lawrence Johnson Jr." Lyric said, "Well, Lawrence Johnson Jr., I'm sure babysitting a woman in distress is not how you planned on spending your vacation in Puerto Rico. So I'll just wait in my car. A couple of hours from now, the cabs will be moving, and I won't have any difficulties getting home." LJ said, "You gonna wait in your disabled car in an empty club parking lot at 4 something in the morning by yourself? I can't let you do that. My mother would turn over in her grave." LJ reached in his pocket and pulled out his cell phone. And before he could dial the number, Lyric said, Who are you calling?" LJ said, "The owner of this club." And then Lyric chuckled, because she knew who owned the club. And there was no way in the world that this visitor was calling him. She didn't know what this slickster was up to, but if he had nefarious intentions, she was going to get him before he got her. She reached her hand in her purse, and before she could pull it back out, LJ had one of his huge hands around her wrist. With the other hand, he was putting the phone on speaker. She listened as a man said, "LJ, ¿qué pasó? Did you find something to get into, or what? Because you're the only one who hasn't made it back to the estate." LJ said, "I got caught up in the parking lot with one of your employees. She's having car issues and doesn't trust me to give her a ride home." The man on the other end of the phone said, "Which employee?" When LJ said, "The singer. Think she said her name is Lyric." The man on the phone said, "Can she hear me?" Lyric said, "Yes," confused because she knew that there was no way in the world that this man had just called Javier, the right-hand man of Emmanuel Manny Lopez. And her eyes almost bugged out of her head when the man on the other end of that phone said that he was indeed Javier. And then he said, "Would you be more comfortable if I sent you a driver?" Lyric said, "You don't have to go through all of that trouble. Like I told your employee, I'll just stay in my car for a couple of hours and take a taxi home." Javier said, "That's unacceptable. If you ever have any issues like this again, you call your manager. You know that we take care of our own." When Lyric didn't respond, LJ said, "I'll wait here with her until the driver arrives." Javier said, "Gracias, compadre." And LJ said, "De nada. But do me a favor and tell Lyric here not to shoot me." And Lyric turned beet red because she'd forgotten that she still had her hand inside her purse on her pistol, and LJ still had a vice grip on her wrist. Javier said, "Lyric, you're safe with LJ. And for the record, that man's not a worker. He's a boss." Meanwhile, in Dallas, At Angela and Stephanie's estate, Selima, Stephanie, Tru, and Rennie was sharing a suite of apartment-style rooms for the weekend. The night was over, but the three musketeers plus one had quite a bit of catching up to do. While Tru had been off-grid, Selima had been sat down. Being a new mother had kept her sufficiently busy, and having a husband who was not playing with her had her sufficiently humbled. And when Rennie was done stirring up mayhem in Puerto Rico under the guise of being there to support Stephanie after the birth of her second daughter, the Queen Mother had parked her in Denton. She was almost done with the master's portion of her master's to PhD program, and all that was required was an externship and her thesis defense. So to keep Rennie close at hand and out of the way, the Queen Mother had arranged for Rennie to complete her externship at Vibrantly You, Angela's hair and skincare brand. Since Rennie was obtaining her master's and PhD in biochemical engineering, the Queen Mother and Angela had agreed that an externship in Vibrantly You's chemistry department would be the perfect use of Rennie's talent, a great way for her to spend her time, and the best way to keep her out of trouble. And it didn't look like the four ladies were going to sleep anytime soon, because the last 6 months of all of their lives had been hella interesting. Rennie was smack dab in the middle of telling the ladies how exactly her and Regina had avoided hand-to-hand combat. She said, "Y'all know I don't play about my brother. The hell with Detroit. It's us over everybody. You got beef with mine, you got beef with me." Her ass been grass if it wasn't for the Queen Mother. Not only did she have me stuck in this boring town, but she had me under constant supervision. And every time I managed to slide up from under my babysitters, either she, LJ, Q, or Angela ran interference, preventing me from getting my hands on Regina. Several months earlier, in absolute frustration, Rennie just came out and said to the Queen Mother, "I don't understand what the issue is. You don't play about your family just like I don't play about mine. Why are you so hell-bent on stopping me from putting paws on Regina? You're only going to be able to prevent the inevitable for so long. Eventually, she and I are going to come face to face, and it's going to be on like popcorn." The Queen Mother said, "Rennie, this is between LJ and Regina. As far as I'm concerned, the whole situation has gotten way out of hand, and they both have lost their minds. She was wrong for leaving him, and he was wrong for letting her. But that's on them. They're the captains of their own ships. Your brother is a grown man. You are the little sister, and he is more than capable of protecting and defending himself without any interference from you. He didn't ask for your help. He isn't confiding in you, and you are right there with him every day to see that he is not pining after Regina. He's not in shambles at the demise of his marriage. If anything, he seems happier now." Rennie said, "He puts on a good face, but I know my brother. He's heartbroken. And as far as I'm concerned, Regina's the only one who's actually doing anything wrong. She don't want to be kept. He don't need to try and keep her. She don't want to be saved, don't save her. Ain't that how the song go?" The Queen Mother said, "Whatever the case, what we think is irrelevant. Because the only people whose opinions matter are LJ's and Regina's. And whatever happens between them is between them. Ask yourself, Rennie, what would Jesus do?" Rennie said, "As far as I'm concerned, we walk by faith and fight on sight." The Queen Mother said, "You know what? I'm done with this. Since talking some sense into you is obviously not going to happen, I'm going to up the stakes. You are months into your externship. What exactly would happen if for some reason your externship ended now?" Rennie said, "Oh, you on your act like a queen, think like a warrior-ish, huh? You know full well it's too late for me to start a completely different externship. I'd be behind the 8 ball and unable to defend my thesis in the fall." Queen Mother said, "And imagine how difficult it would be for your advisor to find you another externship if he learned that you were dismissed from this one for unprofessional behavior." That was all Rennie needed to hear. She knew full well that there had been nothing unprofessional about her behavior at Vibrantly You, and the fact that this issue was personal and not business wouldn't be an argument she could make in order to get her way. So she folded, but of course, she had to try to get in the last word. She said, "Fine, but I'm letting you know right now that if that heifer comes out her face sideways, if she even look at me funny." The Queen Mother said, "I've already spoken with Regina. She and I have an understanding. The last thing that she wants to do is fight with her children's aunt. And you shouldn't want to fight with your niece and nephew's mother. LJ and Regina's marriage may be ending, but those children still deserve to have a family that is not feuding because their aunt hasn't learned to temper herself." Rennie said, "Well, I'll be damned. Ain't you a hypocrite?" The Queen Mother said, "Excuse you?" Rennie said, "All of this from the woman who knocked her daughter-in-law out of her Louboutins in her daughter-in-law's house while her grandchildren were there?" The Queen Mother said, "Ooh, So, one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to you, Rennie, is because you remind me of a younger, less controlled me. I am trying to turn over a new leaf. I am trying to be a good demonstration, and I'm trying to stop you from making bad decisions. You love your brother. Don't make his life harder. I don't want to have to blackmail you into acting like you got good sense. You are here to do a job. Do it. Take your medication, attend your therapy sessions, and stay out of the way. And with that, the beef was squashed between Rennie and Regina. Or at least that's how it appeared. Hearing all of that, the other ladies guffawed. And Stephanie said, Rennie, what are you gonna do if those two kiss and make up? It happens, you know. Divorced people do get back together. I'm living proof. Rennie said, my brother ain't Jesus. He ain't resurrecting the dead. Tru said, they got kids. They've been together forever. They were friends for even longer. If Regina sees the error of her ways, Rennie said, my brother ain't going back. I'm staying in the house with him. I get to see almost on a daily basis just how well he's actually taking this divorce. He's a calmer, more peaceful version of himself without Regina. I didn't even notice how different my brother was. But I did notice I thought it was because of the cancer and all of the Five family drama. But even with all that has happened over the last few months, he still seems happier. And the only reason why I don't still want to knock Regina's head between the washer and the dryer is because life been tearing her behind up. And it looks like she did my brother a favor. Salima said, see, that's what worries me, because that fine behind man, that chocolate skin, all the muscles, them darn near wasteland flocks. Baby. When all three ladies looked at her, Salima said, what? I'm married, not blind. When Q first brought LJ around, I pushed up. Tru said, what? He and Regina were already together then. Salima said, so? I ain't never been scared to take nobody man. A man who ain't married is single. That means he's up for the taking. And if he up for the taking, I'm taking him. She need to be glad he wasn't up for the taking. She let that fine, faithful, unproblematic man go. And in a minute, the family complex gonna be looking like a Luther Vandross concert. Stephanie said, what? Salima said the gate's gonna be surrounded by groupies, throwing their panties at him, if they not already. And all four women lost it. Rennie said, okay, my brother is fine. Tru asked, did anybody ever find out what the secret was? All three women just shook their heads, and then Stephanie said, I flat out asked Angela, and she said that it wasn't her story to tell. If you ask me, I don't think nothing happened. And I don't think that if they told her whatever it is that happened, it would have changed anything. Because Regina always been insecure. Every woman in this room done had to handle a broad behind her man. We've all had to check a man, because it ain't look like he was checking for us. The other three women nodded their heads, and Stephanie continued saying, but Regina done seen cheating around every corner. She just make it up in her head. Salima said some nigga must have took her down through there. Stephanie said no, because she was never in any serious relationships before LJ. Stephanie pointed at Tru and Rennie. We were there. And both women nodded in agreement. Salima asked, then what you think all that's about? Stephanie said, girl, that's a story that's old as time. Having a daddy who didn't want her and feeling like she was second string. Salima said, second string? The woman is brilliant. She's beautiful. After 3 kids, she still got a body to die for. And she had the man that any woman in her right mind would want. Stephanie said, and since they was little kids, LJ wanted my sister. Salima had no idea that LJ and Angela had tried dating briefly in college. And Stephanie didn't run down all the deets, but she did say, yes, they were always friends, but it was clear to anybody who was looking that LJ was crushing on my sister bad. I actually thought they was going to end up together. But when she came home with Marcus, it was clear that that wasn't going to happen. She never looked at LJ the way she looked at Marcus. And she never looked at LJ the way she looks at Q. Hell, she didn't look at Marcus how she looked at Q. That's why I have a hard time believing that anything actually happened between my sister and LJ. My money is on he tried to press her and she shut his behind down. Because him and Regina had been engaged for like 3 years. And months after he got popped, they was walking down the aisle. Rennie said, you might be right, because I used to hear my mother asking LJ all the time when they was going to set a date. And he always had an excuse, but it just seemed like there was something below the surface. Tru said, that's crazy. Stephanie said, you was there. You didn't see it? Tru said, I thought I saw something, but that wasn't really my focus. To me, what's crazy is not so much Regina's response, but Q's. He was there too. How did he miss that his best friend was in love with Angela? How he married her after that? Stephanie said, Q was there, but he wasn't. He had his own stuff going on, remember? I don't think he even met my sister before Regina and LJ's wedding. Salima said, but men gossip just like women do. Ain't no way he didn't tell his best friend. Tru said, that's my point. And now LJ and Angela are working together rather closely. If I was cute, that would be a problem for me. And all three women just stared at Tru. Tru said, what? Stephanie said, you got some nerve. All this LJ, Angela, Regina stuff is basically speculation because we don't know nothing. But we know what happened with you, sis. Selima said, we don't know anything. I don't know what the hell been going on. I've been locked down and shut down, remember? Rennie said, ooh, this is my favorite story. Can I tell it? Stephanie said, how you gonna tell her damn story? Tru said, ain't no story to tell. I'm with Wood. Everybody knows that I'm with Wood. Rennie said, see, that's why I need to tell the story, because she gonna lie. When Rennie was done telling her ghetto fabulous version of the true Big Wood Bosch story, Stephanie was in stitches and Selima looked concerned. She looked at Tru and said, now, you're going to have to clear some of that up. Tru said, in 2 days, we're going to sit down at the round table. And whatever don't come out in the wash will absolutely come out in the rinse. Let's just say that Bosch's nose wasn't the only thing broken. When Big Wood walked out of that hospital, it felt like all my dreams had gone out the window. And what I had left was not enough.